Hello, I'm COD President Paul Ferrace, and I'm in the officer's head aboard USS COD, and we're going to talk about what I think is perhaps the most vital piece of equipment aboard any submarine, the head. Now, the fleet submarine is renowned for crew comforts. The very fact that they include 4 toilets or heads is pretty rare and pretty spectacular for World War II. The heads are distributed throughout the boat. One here in the forward torpedo room. This one is reserved exclusively for use by officers, and as skipper of the COD, this is my domain. There are 2 heads amidships and a third one in maneuvering. Now, there are 2 basic types of heads on submarines. An air expulsion head like this one, and there are 2 of those, and 2 gravity flushers, which are very simple. They have a valve flush and they drain to a holding tank. But because of the design of the boat, this one here, number 1 and number 4 back in maneuvering, there's no space for a large sanitary holding tank, so those heads flush overboard with each use, and we'll get into that in a minute. First, let's talk about why you would call a toilet the head. Well, it goes back to the old sailing ship days when, wooden sailing ships and the wind rushing through the sails, pushing the boat forward. Sanitation accommodations are very simple, very crude. You went to the head of the boat or the bowsprit, and depending on the size of the ship, you would climb down either on netting or ropes, or if it's a large warship, you would have a platform and do your business at the bow. Because remember, wind is coming from the back toward the front, and even though you're moving through the water, the wind is blowing anything forward, and it just made more sense. You wouldn't want to do that on the poop deck. No pooping on the poop deck, because the captain's cabin is generally below in the transom, and you don't want to, tinkle on his glass. That's a no-no. So that is where we get the term head. By the way, the first submarine toilet, now by submarine toilet I mean a toilet that can flush against sea pressure, that isn't a gravity flush, is in fact invented, 37 years before the first submarine. Yes, 37 years before the first submarine, the Holland boat. The USS Monitor. Remember that first Monitor, the cheese box on a raft, that big heavily armored turret, that's where the 2 Dahlgren guns are, or the Parrott guns. I don't know. I'm not a World War II Civil War buff. I mean, a Civil War buff. But anyway, but below, in the raft area, below basically the waterline, is where all the crew lives. And Erickson, that brilliant engineer, not only built the first ironclad with a rotating turret and all that, but he invented the first toilet for the crew of the Monitor that can flush up overboard against sea pressure. So if you get a chance to go down to the Hampton Roads Naval Museum, you'll see the Monitor's turret and I think the propeller, because it had the first compound screw for propulsion. Apparently the heads, which in my opinion are as equally innovative and important historically, probably didn't survive 150 years underwater. So, but anyway, so Monitor, there's your toilet history. So back aboard COD, World War II, Gato class fleet sub. The Gatos had a slightly different arrangement than the later Baleos. The officer's head up forward is an air expulsion head. The Baleo class boats swap this out for a gravity flusher. They move one of the air expulsion heads to the crew, after battery crew berthing, where the forward head is an air expulsion. Next to it is a gravity flusher. And then the maneuvering room head gets moved to the after torpedo room, and again, that's air expulsion head. I'm not sure why they did that, except perhaps in the event of some casualty, you didn't want to lose all of your toilet abilities. So anyway, we're going to talk about the officer's head. Now, this had to be flushed against sea pressure with every use. By the way, let me stop for a second and just say the head on cod has an amazing history. If you want to go back to an earlier program, we talk about how our engineering officer, Frank Kimball, had to write out an aerial bomb attack and the near loss of the boat in this cubicle because the cod's forward torpedo room, due to losing control during a dive and an enemy bombing attack, the forward room was probably down close to 600 feet, and the sea pressure warped the framing and this door frame enough that he couldn't get out until we planed up. But go back and look at that episode. And of course, a more recent episode where we talked about the importance on submarines of TP or toilet paper. But as you can see, that's not a problem for us right now. We have plenty of toilet paper. But let's talk about using the head. Now, we're going to have to probably have Evan come in here kind of tight. But while we're here, let's just talk about some of the basic arrangements. You have the bowl. Below that, you have the pressure vessel, where the contents of the toilet bowl will drain. We'll get into the details of that later. You have a nice, wonderful foot pedal right here so that your legs are kept somewhat at a normal height. You know, this toilet is much higher than commodes would be at home, so they gave you that little platform so that your legs or your knees are at an acceptable height. We'll talk about why Cobia's officer's head is different in a moment. This big pipe back here is actually the starboard vent riser for #1 ballast tank. That is an engineering compromise. That's a dangerous weak spot. That is sea pressure inside the people tank, but again, subject for another discussion. And of course, we have our toilet seat and a whole lot of valves and things, and we're going to get into that in a minute. So, suffice to say, if you're invited aboard a submarine in operation in World War II and you need to use this head, it's going to be a bit of a challenge. In fact, when submarines would rescue civilians early in the war, in fact, we had a situation where certain early fleet boats were picking up nurses out of Corregidor. Well, they're officers, and they had one of the Filipino stewards who was the toilet attendant, and his job was to instruct the women how to use this, and in fact, perhaps even flush it for them. But, you know, that was not an issue aboard COD. So let's use the head. Well, we're going to simulate. Well, we're not even going to simulate. We'll discuss this. So I'm coming in the compartment here, and I know I am quite large compared to most people who are going to be using this. So depending on whether I'm going #1 or #2, that's kind of important, because the first thing I'm going to do, and up here referring to these wonderful instructions on this plate, see that the bowl flapper A is closed. Well, that's this thing, and boy, you certainly do want to make sure that that flapper valve in the bottom of the bowl is closed. It comes up, it drops down. Evan, I think we need a close-up of that because that's so important. All right, you want to make sure it's closed. The gate valve C right here is it's the gate valve C, and the discharge line is open. You want that open, and there's open and closed. Very good. Then the valve E, and we can't talk about E enough. Right here is open next to the bowl to admit necessary water. So this valve right here is going to put the specific amount of water you need in that bowl to use it. Now, if you're just urinating, that's not a problem. If you're, having a bowel movement, then of course you want that, considerable amount of water in there. Okay. And then you want to close D and E. All right. So now you're doing what you need to do. Now you're done. Well, perhaps you were reading Life magazine or the New Yorker, April 24th, 1943, just before COD is commissioned. So yeah, in fact, it's the week we're launched or whatever. So yes, we have this period reading material in here. But anyway, so you've read your article and maybe one of the officers is in need. So now we've got to flush. Okay, now pull and release lever A. So what I'm going to do is move this lever forward, and that's going to drop the contents. Now, this is secured so that you cannot use it. We had that done in dry dock because you could flood the boat. Now, some of you are probably aware a German U-boat was sunk through their improper use of their toilets, and that can certainly happen with this. And in fact, I understand it happened to Silversides when she was in Chicago as a reserve training boat. Water in the pipelines froze one winter, burst, and she flooded her forward room. So it's a problem, but not for us because we've rendered this inoperable. But suffice to say, this is your flush level. You push it forward. That flapper valve at the bottom of the bowl drops down, and the bowl contents drop into this receiver valve or chamber below that the bowl is mounted on. So, get a lovely close-up of that. Now, I'm going to pull this lever back up, which will seat that flapper valve against the bottom of the bowl. And you definitely want to make sure that is seated because the next thing we're going to do is rock this outboard. Okay, this is an air charging manifold right here, F. I'm charging that receiver with 10 pounds more air pressure than the outboard sea pressure. So here's my sea pressure. Right now we're at 0. Apparently the red line says you may not have enough air pressure from the ship's basic service air to flush this against sea pressure if it's more than 132 psi, if that hasn't been messed with, and I don't believe it has. So you're going to charge, let's say we're at 40 pounds psi sea pressure. I'm going to charge that receiver with 50 pounds of air pressure, and here's my air pressure valve. So I know sea pressure 40, the measuring tank, water closet measuring tank is going to be at 50 pounds. Okay, now, if I do everything correctly, I'm standing above a pressurized crap bomb. That's not good, especially if I'm a junior officer reporting aboard his very first submarine, and the senior officers have played a little trick on me. They have put a stack of maybe 3 washers at the stop valve for lever A. So I think it's at a hard stop, but there's a little hairline crack at the bottom of that flapper valve. When I go to charge that tank down there, that hairline crack is going to spray the contents up in my face. Never a good thing. They're laughing, and of course, I've got to clean it up because it's my mess. So that did occasionally happen on some submarines where the officers were real jokers. Anyway, so I have got this pressurized crap bomb, 10 psi greater than ambient pressure. Now I'm going to, from the measuring tank, I'm going to rock this lever now inboard to blow it overboard. So and as I move this forward, this is pneumatically opening a discharge valve, and it is blowing the crap. So physics takes over from high pressure to low pressure. The contents are now blowing overboard through an overboard discharge line, which for us is roughly at our water line. In normal trim would be about 5 feet below the water line for a normal boat in combat trim. Now, we are going to insert at this point an incredibly important, in fact, the only known photograph of a fleet submarine officer's head being discharged at sea. I think it's the USS Angler coming into port. There's probably dignitaries on the pier. There's probably a band playing. The boat is coming in. The line handlers are throwing their lines onto the dock, or vice versa. And somebody, one of the officers, has just flushed the head. You see quite the burbling of water. Again, look at that picture. So anyway, so we blow that overboard. Now we're going to have to secure all these valves, close them, and shut everything for the next purpose, for the next use. Now, just as a courtesy, I'm going to put an inch or two of water in the bowl, again, as a gas seal. And it's also good because if you have a couple inches of water, you might notice air bubbling out of it. That tells you that the receiver tank, or also known as the measuring tank, contains pressure. You want to make sure when you come in here that that isn't the case. So that's pretty much all of that to flush the toilet. Now, what if we don't have the availability of air, maybe through a casualty or some other thing? So there is yet another option for us, and I have to kind of move. I don't know how Frank Kimball did it. I'm going to step out here. That way I can point to this hand pump right next to the bowl. Now, that allows the user to hand pump the contents. Now, here is the handle. There's a little bracket in here. You will put that in here, and then, of course, I'll have to open and close certain valves, but basically you can hand pump the contents overboard using this valve handle right here, this pump valve. So we don't want to use that, so we're going to kind of stow it right here on this wonderful bracket. By the way, someone took our valve handle, but it's easily replaced. Home Depot, you buy 1 1/4 inch piping with a cap. Some of the other amenities in here I want to point out, because it's kind of fun. I'm enjoying this. You have a Fleet Submarine, a Gato class EB cigarette butt, so you can smoke in here. And above you get a fan to blow around air and share the love. And you have a ventilation fan blowing in, so we have air circulating. That's always a good thing. Yeah, there's our valve. We have a light and all the spare toilet paper we're going to need. Now, so this is an air expulsion head, and as built, COD has one of these exact types of heads back in maneuvering, which in 1951 the electricians' mates deem a hazard, because people would use that and smell up the maneuvering room. So they got permission from Captain Francis Rich to remove it. They said they needed more space for storage. So we lost number 4 head back in maneuvering. We go to 3. But there's also some differences among our friends. By the way, we can include a picture that I shot or I got from Cobia of their wonderful maneuvering room head. It's wonderful. I think there's also one aboard drum. But if you look at the officer's head on Cobia, and we're going to insert a picture that I got of Cobia's head, they have a unique head. It's the same toilet bowl, but instead of a small cylindrical measuring tank, or call it the crap tank, they have a large, kind of an onion dome shaped tank that actually kind of is a throne. I'm on a throne, but they literally have a throne higher than everybody else. And so their little foot pedal, their little footrest, is actually, it folds up. It's actually quite that high because, again, you don't want to have your feet dangling because their toilet seat is at least a foot higher. Now, why do they have that large onion dome receiver tank? Well, again, if you are running silent, you don't want to be blowing the head overboard. You need to save it until you're out of harm's way. And this would only allow you one use before you have to hold off until you can flush it. But if you have a receiver or a volume tank, measuring tank, that's, say, good for 5 uses, well, that's so much the better. So even though Cobia is built roughly the same time as cod, same shipyard, she has that innovation where several officers can use the head before they need to blow it overboard. So that's how that works. Now, I have had the incredible honor of using heads on Pampanito, the gravity flushers back aft. So this is my resume on crapping on subs. So Pampanito, several Sturgeon class and LA class boats, and I have even used the heads on the Dutch submarine Walrus and the Brownvis. In fact, I got to tell you a funny story. In 2015, the Dutch were gracious enough to invite me and a number of our cod crew to tour and, in fact, have a nice rice taffel dinner on Brownvis. And, after dinner, I excused myself to the head and I said, my crew probably could use it too. And they said, oh, absolutely. Of course, that was a simple gravity flusher, not like this. And so everybody, I think whether they needed to or not, was using the head so they could say they had the honor of using a real submarine head. If you have seen Soviet submarine heads, they are nasty, and that's a subject for another discussion. As we know, German U-boats only had 2, and one I think that they had stuffed with potatoes and things. Not so with American boats. Now, the cod, with its 2 gravity flushers amidships, anybody could use those because it's simply this flush lever here. You fill the bowl with water, you move the flush valve handle forward and back to drain it, and you're done. You put a little water in there as a gas seal. By the way, there are no urinals on fleet subs, but there is a feature. Not on this one. I think there's it may have been removed, but instead of having to sit down and operate that lever by hand, it's connected to a foot pedal. So like the top of a cymbal hi-hat. My brother's a drummer, I'm not. There's a foot pedal, and it's very similar to that. You can operate that valve, that flapper valve, while you're standing if you're a guy. So anyway, so there we are. That is my tutorial on using heads on cod, in this case the officer's head. And so remember to hit the like, the subscription button, the notification bell, and we'll be back with more scintillating aromatic content. Thank you.